In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Let all glory, praise, and worship be to our God through His begotten Son Christ, who allowed us to preach at this moment, to hear the word, and to listen to the message. Before I start, every one of you guys who are not from Seattle, including me, I want us to give a really good round of applause for the people who prepared this. Like they did so much to prepare this and restlessly without sleeping. So, round of applause. Good job. You guys are serving and doing a lot for the kingdom of God. Is there a way that we can turn on that light? It's a little bit. All right. So, how many of you asked the question or reflected yesterday, the question that I gave you? How many of you were there? How many of you were there yesterday before we start? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you came for today? Like, weren't able to participate yesterday? Okay. For those of you who were here yesterday, we gave an assignment, a question to reflect for yourself before we start today's message. You guys remember? Anyone who remember? Just one of the questions. Anyone who remember? You can shout out. Anyone? Yes? No?
What causes chaos?
Say it again.
What part of our lives do you find chaos?
Fairly close.
Where do I feel the most out of order?
Very good. That was the first one. Second, what in my life feels scattered, loud, unrest, unsteady? And the last one was, am I carrying a chaos that I didn't even start it, or I'm a part of it? Right? Am I carrying a chaos I never even invited into my life? Those were the questions to reflect. And I hope you guys had a chance to reflect that. And I gave you a little bit sneak peek yesterday. That what we're going to cover, especially by the Seattle crew that were asked, it may be a little bit a plot twist, a little bit different. Of course, we're going to cover it, but maybe not as the way that they expected or you guys expected when we talk about chaos or when we talk about peace. So, this message is very important. The reason why it's very important is the goal is to change mindset. Because if you change your mindset, perception of something, it's easier after that to do a practical thing that you need to do, the chores. But the problem that we have in a Christian life is we don't even have a right perception of who our Creator is. We just understand it based on culture when we grew up. Just shut up, listen, and obey. Who's God? Why am I obeying? Why do I have to obey? So we don't really dig deeper. Surface level, we understand the idea about God. So it's so hard to create a relationship. Let alone with the saints and the righteous. You have no idea. So how many people ask me like a question, especially when we teach about intercession, the prayer of saints, and people individually would come and ask me like, how can I create a relationship with the Holy Virgin Mary? Like with the angel Michael. It's so hard. And it's because of our perception of things. So the goal, and I pray today, is completely change your mindset of what peace is. Or I'll say later on. And what truly chaos means in our life. That's the goal. And then later on, the second part of it, I'm gonna give you some practical things to do. But the goal is to change perspective of things. So the sermon, peace in chaos, but the first part of it, the part one, is gonna be understanding the roots of chaos. understanding the roots of chaos, which is the absence of divine order. The absence of divine order. When I'm preparing this sermon, I start doing a little bit of research about what we think of chaos. Or more, what do we have out there about peace? What do we learn about peace? And I'm going to give you a little bit stat. Okay? In 2024, which means just last year, there were 110 active armed conflicts in the world. 110. These are the armed conflicts that are kind of registered in a way like known. I would imagine it's more than that. That would be these are the ones that are record globally. The United Nations, and I'm assuming in this research, it's yearly, spends $6 billion on peacekeeping mission. And then, starting, I think it was on, I forgot, the early 1901, I think it's 1901, right? There is 140 Nobel Peace Prize winners that are recognized by, creating peace. And I don't know how many of you are a bit familiar with the situation mostly in the country Ethiopia. There is a word that they use in a political sense, and I always it amuses me. I laugh about that. They say "Ansarawi Salam." I don't know if you guys know what it means, but "Ansarawi Salam" means it's not peace, but in that context, in that area, in that whatever, they declare it a peace. And yet, after all these efforts, initiatives, and all things, we're more anxious than ever, we're more disconnected than ever, we're more restless than ever. Wouldn't you say so? And the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, calls stress and anxiousness or anxiety the epidemic of the 21st century. While having all these peace things. And let's make it a little bit more practical. And I like this one because I am part of it. And what some researchers say, an average adult checks therefore 96 times a day. 96 times a day. Searching, scrolling, getting distracted. And I personally am a prime example, the first example of this. Because, and I'm going to give you my testament, what happened. Yesterday, in the church, for some reason that I get distracted and I forgot my backpack into the church. And I would say, I would attest that there are some deacons who are into it intentionally, but anyways, I lost my backpack. And then I went into the hotel and I was resting there, and people weren't able to go to the church to get the bag. Now, I completely forgot that my charger was in the bag. So I didn't have a charger. So earlier in the morning, very early in the morning when I got up, my phone is 10%, 15%. I keep calling people, everyone to get the charger. But not only that, I personally really I saw myself every 5 seconds I was watching my phone. If the battery's dying, is it dying? Is it not dying? What am I going to do if the battery dies now? And I learned that, especially for the servants who are teachers, I learned that in actuality, when you give sermon, when you prepare a teaching, it's not only for other people, it's for you. The lesson is for you. So I learned a lesson. And I put my phone down, just only for 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, I laid down on the bed, tried not to think anything, not even a thought, and closing my eyes and rest. It was the hardest 5 minutes of earlier in the morning today. That's how we are wired. That's what is happening to us. And one study found that even when given a chance to sit quietly, 67% of men and 25% of women choose to give themselves electric shock rather than to sit in silence with their thoughts. How crazy is that? And yet we try to talk about peace, try to find peace. We have created like multiple treaties, multiple sessions, podcasts, multiple things about peace. We have created peace treaties on paper, but while carrying warfare within our heart. We have conferences of ending wars, but avoid confrontation of people that transgressed against us. Right? So I started to think, maybe, this is where the plot twist I said, maybe the chaos that we're thinking is not external. Maybe the chaos in the world isn't just out there. Maybe that war, that chaos that we're thinking to find peace isn't within us. See, this is a mindset change that we need to have. Oh, I need to get away from such and such groups so that I can find peace. Or such and such person, the relationship that I have this person, so that I will find my peace. My peace. We all say these things, right? I need to take care of my peace. So the world has taught us to seek peace by solving external problems. But the scripture, flip it completely upside down because it doesn't say that. What did it say? Peace I leave with you. My peace. Not my peace, the Lord's peace. My peace I give to you. Not this peace that the Lord is saying this. That this peace I'm talking about is not as peace that the world teaches. Or the words try to toil so much to achieve. No. It's different. John chapter 14, verse 21 to 27. Peace I leave with you. This is our theme verse starting yesterday, if you remember. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives. But before we go far along to understand what this peace, or whatever this context of peace that we're talking about, what Christ offers, we must first understand the nature of chaos. The chaos that we live in. Not even if we live in mostly, that we carry in. That we carry with it. So in the Orthodox tradition, chaos is not just out of things being out of order. It's not disorder or noise. It's a spiritual disintegration from God. That is chaos. A rupture of the soul caused by the separation of the divine power. That's what we call chaos. As peace is not just a theoretical idea, chaos is not just a theory. It's deeply personal. And I say that, as I promised yesterday, we're going to have two, I'm excited about this, two examples in the Bible that we see and have a comparison between someone who is in chaos and someone who has peace. And these famous characters in the Bible is Cain and Daniel. It is Cain and Daniel. Cain from the beginning of the early creation. Daniel in the end of the Old Testament, to start the mission of Christ. Completely different time zone, century. Completely different environment, situation. Same person in the creation of God. Same people have an opportunity to be in the presence of God. But there are examples for two completely different outcomes. Cain and Daniel. So we'll discuss about them today. One had peace despite outer chaos. One has peace despite outer chaos. The other has a complete destruction of outer chaos. But the other had outer peace. But the Cain has outer peace but chaos within. But Daniel has outer destruction, chaos, but peace within his heart. So we'll see these two people. And then when we see these two people, we'll describe of what chaos means and define it in three ways. And the first one is this. First, chaos is defined, or we say is the collapse of the created order. Chaos is the collapse of the created order. And if you remember, and I'm assuming most of you, maybe not all, and it's completely fine, but most of you know the story of the creation of mankind, or the creation, any creation, when it starts in Genesis, and how God created the world. Creation begins with making an order. Some say there was disorder. And that is misinterpreted by people because some people would think God creates disorder. No, that's not the concept in Orthodox Christianity. It is making what is already being created orderly. So, an example that some fathers would give is this. For example, if I am an artist, a person who draws, if I have an ink, and if I have a canvas, if I have a brush, I have three different entities, three different things. But that doesn't mean it's disorder. But then when I draw a picture within the canvas, something that is visible, something that is seen, something that is perceptive would appear. So God didn't create disorder. But from what is created, He made them to be orderly so that we can truly find God through it. So the earth, when it says the earth was without form, that's what it means. And void. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, the second verse in the Bible. And God orders it, bring it light, life, and purpose. And when God created these all creations, and I want you to focus on these things because it helps us for our message. In every day that He created things, it says what? One thing very common in all of it. It says, after He created, it says, God sees the creation. And it was perfect. And He created the earthly living beings. He sees them. And it was perfect. But then when we come to man, when man was created, he was created in an orderly way, into an orderly fashioned creation. But when man sins, he reintroduces chaos by rejecting divine order. That's what happened. So sin is disordering what God has harmonized. What sin means is disordering what God has already harmonized. And then after that, that's because of that, the world becomes chaotic. With the eye of the soul is darkened. When the soul no longer sees or reflects God, that is what starts the chaos. So every sin is the return to uncreation. When committing sin, is returning back to that disorderly uncreation and unraveling us. So having said that, we'll see the first character in the Bible, Cain. Cain, a portrait of inner chaos. In the world, that's still untouched. This is what I wanted to make sure for you to understand. Imagine you're living right now, right? Like all this initiative of like, let's turn back to nature, let's do organic and all of those things, right? We do so much things. Imagine you are in the time of Cain. Everything is organic, everything is fresh, everything is just created, perfect. Right? The story text in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1 to 16. And the story is this. And some part of it you wouldn't find it in the Bible. That's why we always teach that the church, holy tradition, scriptures is very helpful to truly understand the deeper message of this. So Abel, his brother, and Cain were born and living, in the world with Adam and Eve. But then, from Adam and Eve, they learned, which is not mentioned in the Bible, they learned how to put sacrifice to God. How to offer sacrifice to God. So one of the days, based on their learning, they went out on a journey to offer a sacrifice to God. But here's what happened. When Abel puts a sacrifice, he was a herder. He was a cattle person, right? So he took on a sheep or a lamb who has no blemish, who has a lamb that is so pure. Because in deeper sense, in his heart, he knows that, God does not eat this. But God, because of his pureness, because of his immaculate nature, he deserves something that is pure. He deserves something that is genuinely, clean. And he offered a sacrifice of a lamb or a sheep. On the contrary, Cain says, God, he's not going to eat it. And it's just a ritual, right? It's just something to do. As always, that we think of the church, what we do is just a ritual thing. So he just carelessly would grab some of he was a farmer, from the grains, and he offered a sacrifice. Cain lived in a world fresh from Eden. No cities, no war, no famine, no oppression. His world was externally peaceful. Externally peaceful. As any human would have seen, but yet he was the first murderer in history. And then when he offered sacrifice, the Bible says, God saw the sacrifice of Abel and accepted it. But he didn't accept the sacrifice of Cain. And this is where the conversation would go. This is when this happened, at the moment this happened, and some say there's other reasons before that, but for our context, as soon as this happened, in his heart, chaos starts festering. So Cain's chaos doesn't begin with rejection. It didn't begin with God rejecting him, but with apathy towards God's invitation. Are you following me here? Apathy, carelessness is what starts the process of later on what will become a chaos within our heart. That's what it starts from Cain. And when I was preparing this, especially for some of the deacon brothers, or I would say the rest of you too, I started saying the verse that God and Cain conversated. And in that verse, God would say, Cain, why your face is gloom? Why you're sad? Right? But the verse, when I read it in the Amharic or in any versions of the English Bible, and what I read in the Orthodox Study Bible, is completely different. And I was confused. And of course, even as a priest or anyone, sometimes God reveals something that you never see. And I'll read the verse for you so that you would understand. Like, because this is very important. I know I'm taking a little time, but be patient with it because it helps you to truly understand things in a different perspective. So, in Genesis chapter 4, it says, but he did not respect Cain and his sacrifices. So Cain was extremely sorrowful, and his countenance, his face fall. So the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you extremely sorrowful? And why has your countenance fallen? Did you not sin? Did you not sin?" And if you guys had a chance to have another, like King James or whatever version Bible, you wouldn't find this verse specifically the way I say it. So did Cain sin at this time or not sin? See? Cain didn't do anything outwardly that as we think of a sin. But his indifference, his apathy, was counted in God's eye as a sin. So anything that you do, brothers and sisters, anything that you do towards God, it doesn't matter of the time. It doesn't matter if you're praying 3 hours. If you do 5 minutes of genuine communion with Him, talk with Him, that has more value than 5-6 hours of performative, ingenuine act, because that is a sin. That is a sin. So he told them, "Did you not sin? Even though you brought it rightly, even though you bring it like, because it's a ritual, it's the same thing, even though you brought the sacrifice rightly, but you did not divide it rightly." And then God said to him, "Be still. Be still." And then you wouldn't find this word, zimmel. Be still. In any of, even the Amharic Bible, you wouldn't find this word. But in the Ge'ez version, you'll find this one. Zimmel. He told him that. Why did he say that? Because the reason why Cain was gloomy, was frustrated, is not because of his sacrifice with God. If truly that, let's say, he did sacrifice carelessly, right? And then God didn't accept a sacrifice. You know what I would do? Say, "Oh, God didn't accept a sacrifice. I know it's a bummer, but let me bring something to sacrifice that I may please God." That's what I would do. But Cain, the reason why he's gloomy, instead of looking within to examine his heart or offering, Cain looked outward. Cain looked outward, not outward just a perception. He looked to someone next to him in a comparison. In a comparison. Cain looked outward to Abel. Why is this accepted? Why not me? Even though deep down that he knows that he did wrong. Comparison took roots, envy grew, and Cain's inner order collapsed. That ordered creation from God, it collapsed into bitterness and then eventually murder. He couldn't see clearly anymore. His face fell. A bodily language, a bodily sign showed in God's eye that he wasn't right. But the love of God for us, for all of us, it's unimaginable. God, knowing that the sacrifice is ingenuine, God, knowing that why Cain was mad, he told him, if you continue doing this, if you continue going in this journey, you're going to go and commit another sin. So, you should rule over sin. You should rule over sin. So he said this thing, be still. This is very important. We'll talk about that. Be still. His recourse, which is Abel's recourse, shall be to you. You guys are going to have a conversation later on. You guys are going to meet. And you're going to rule over him. You're going to rule over him. So this is intended towards Abel. But in the newer versions, rule over a sin. That's what it defines in the Bible. But that's not what it says in the older versions. Be still. I know disorder is happening in your heart. You're anxious. You're feared. You're angry. And your thoughts are fighting and creating chaos within you. Be still. If you're not going to be still, when Abel can come next time, you're going to kill him. So that is uncreated order. But in opposite, a created order is not comparison. A created order is not comparison, but communion. Not measuring ourselves against others, but aligning ourselves to God. That was the created order. That was the created order. The created order for us is to truly focus and communicate with God only. Not to see others. The second example, on the contrary, on the opposite side, Daniel, inner peace amid outer chaos. Daniel, if you guys had a chance to read his story, Daniel, while he was young, in Israel, the country is besieged by Babylon. They control over them. And they took captives. So many souls, especially with an intention. Nebuchadnezzar and the other kings, with an intention, they captured the young ones so that they could train them to change their culture, their tradition, their faith. And in order to do that, they changed their names as well. So from the outer context, for Daniel, outer chaos, political pressure. Then Daniel lived in exile in Babylon, a foreign land under a pagan king. There, they believe in God, but they're under a pagan king, surrounded by so many of idol worshippers. To some extent, even if we don't move it extremely like that, but this is where our journey is in our life right now, where we live. Everywhere idol worshiping, which is worldly worshiping, worshiping of fame, worshiping of celebrities, and all of those in our world. Similar as Daniel, in a foreign land. Persecution. Everyone is being persecuted left and right. And even when the jealous officials at that time plowed out against Daniel, right? Tricked King Darius at that time into outlawing prayer to anyone but the king. Daniel was treated in multiple persecutions, trials, chaos outside. But inside, he was still. He was still. Why was he still? You know why he was still? Because Daniel's vision was vertical. Cain's vision was horizontal. Daniel's vision was up. But Cain's vision was to look sideways, not upward. And I personally argue, again, this is not in the scholar's teaching, but I personally imagine, let's say that, imagine. That would be the reason why from the four children's, Ananiah, Azariah, Mishael, and then Daniel, the three children are given a wisdom, interpretation. But for Daniel, it is given what? vision, and prophecy. The three children's, their existence or their trials is out external, with the fire and everything. Even though same, righteous people, right? So that's why, one of the scholars in 4th century, Jerome, wrote saying this: to the three youths, knowledge and skill in all books and wisdom were given, fitting them for service in the royal court. But to Daniel, God gave understanding also of all visions and dreams, because he has to reveal divine mysteries far beyond his time. He was still, and his focus was upward, and vision is given to him. In our generation, as I said earlier, of my experience, being still is the hardest thing to do, right? And in today's world, the source of our chaos, all of us, again, I'll be the chief of that. The source of our chaos is what? This. This is the source of our chaos. IG, TikTok, whatever social media if you can think of. Success is based or measured by this. Beauty is measured by this. Achievements are measured by this. Like Cain, a digital Eden for us. That makes us to feel inadequate. Right? And that inadequacy feeling creating chaos within us. Seeing others praised, maybe in your workplace or even in the church, you see others being praised and acclamated and encouraged. And you interpret that as a rejection or neglect of you. And you feel and say, what? Why is my work invisible? They got here early already, and then they've gotten a boss's attention in a workplace. We say that. And then we would say, maybe I should stop trying. Why? Comparison, seeing. Bitterness, withdrawal, discontent because of that. Or maybe it's not a workplace. Maybe it's our stage in life. Brothers, not finding the right job that we want. Sisters, not being in a relationship at the time that we think of will be a relationship. And then the source of our chaos comes. When we open here, we see one of our friends getting engaged. And then we see the ring. And we see the wedding. And we see our kids. We'll start to say this. What am I doing wrong? They are getting in a relationship, they're getting married, they're traveling, they're doing all the success. God must favor them more than me. Is he even listening to me? Is my prayer, is it being heard by God? Chaos. Friction within us, between our relationship with God. Begin doubting God, resenting others, falling into spiritual apathy. That's where mostly our services, if you truly are honest with you, starts to be just to do it. Right? Because why? We see our people that are doing the same thing as us are successful and exceeding in things. But not me. So I just do it. God must be far from me. Am I too impure to him, to hear him, like they do? What is wrong with my prayer life? But what all these examples have in common, is one thing: seeing, comparison. It starts with seeing something that was never meant to be to define us. It's not meant to be not to see. We see them. But it wasn't meant to define us. And instead of fixing their eyes on Christ, like Daniel in exile, we fixate it on others, other people's success. And the chaos isn't external, brothers and sisters. It's an inner collapse when we start seeing other things and comparison. Such kind of chaos is needed to be checked in a way God said what? Be still. Be still. What does that mean? If that is this, and then the social media, stop. Stop. If you really want to find your peace. And I like yesterday one of the bingo questions, and I'm assuming probably there is 2 or 3 people that were that have that checked. I'm guessing, if that. One of the questions was, does any one of you does not have a social media? Right? So, if that's what is creating chaos within us, stop. Get up. So when humans sees through God's eyes, it becomes gratitude. It becomes not comparison. And then order is preserved. So the point, to conclude this point, is chaos is the collapse of created order through distorted seeing or comparison. Chaos is the collapse of created order through distorted seeing. Second part, chaos, we define it as a disconnection that grows into restlessness. Chaos is disconnection that grows into restlessness. This is what I mentioned earlier, and we'll cover it. Being restless. Even not having like 2 seconds of our thoughts not to think anything. And some of us said, is that even possible, right? And the reason is because we learn this habit when we grow up, especially in this world, in this community or country. The more that is proponed or exalted is individualism, autonomy, self-expression, do you, I will take care of mine, I'll focus on me, right? Personalizing, like just everything self-preserving, self-focusing. The only thing as a Christian, especially an Orthodox Christian, the only time that we should use the word self, the only time the word that we should use the word self is for selflessness. That's the only thing. To be selfless. Even to the point of this understanding of self-confidence. As an Orthodox Christian, we don't strive for self-confidence. Our confidence is in Him, in Christ. But this self-idea makes us to be focused on ourselves and try to do so much for personal, selfish things. And this very idea often leads to alienation, to be alienated by yourself, anxiousness and unrest, because you're focusing on yourself. How many of you enjoy, including me, to be by yourself, closing your door and on your computer or your YouTube, instead of, community? It's so hard. That's why we grew up the way that we grew up. We scroll endlessly in the media, watch news, compare ourselves constantly. This constant barrage leads to disconnect, and that creates restlessness. Even I talk to so many people, young, achieved, and outwardly says everything is perfect, but have panic attacks. And they don't know why they are having a panic attack. Maybe it's not always what you're doing. Maybe it's not always what you're doing. It's what you're becoming. It's what you're becoming. Because what you do manifests of what you are. And then this is the verse earlier I read in Genesis chapter 4. God said, do you not sin, even though you brought it rightly, but you did not divide it rightly? Be still. His course shall be to you, and you shall rule over him. So instead of not to do that, be still. Disconnected from stillness, from God, and from our friends, and from ourselves, that is our life. But the example that we have, Cain. Let's get back into the story of Cain. Now, Cain, he listened to that. He heard the warning before killing his brother. He heard the warning. And God prophesied, told him that what's going to happen. But in his own choice, the next verse says what? He took his brother into the field. And he struck him. And he killed him. And he killed him. Then God would come in his voice and ask, Cain, where is your brother? And he would answer saying what? Am I my brother's keeper? And God says, your brother's soul or your brother blood cries out. And I love this verse because Abel is the type of Christ. Abel, without committing a sin, who was murdered, who was killed, which is a type of Christ. That's why we use the word in orthodoxy, the word a blood that cries out. So Abel's blood, it cries out, and what it means is it says to God, God, I was murdered, I was killed. And even though physically Abel was dying, his soul, his voice, his blood was in front of God. And that's why in our forefathers say, if the blood of Abel, which is a mere normal person, cries out, how much of soul the blood of Christ eternally cries out for us and for our salvation. So he says, God says, your brother's blood cries out. So you murdered your brother. And he said, from here on, you will be restless, wanderer on the earth. You will be restless, wanderer on earth. And the earth that you toil is not going to give you fruit. So Cain, instead of asking God what he could do better, Cain allowed his heart to become isolated, bitter, gloomy by himself, and he disconnected from both God and his brother. A right mindset and heart should have been, okay, I made a mistake. What could I do better about that so that God would accept me? No, he isolated himself by himself. He chooses inner resentment over relationship. His refusal to seek counsel or connection birthed violence, not healing. His refusal to seek counsel or connection birthed violence and not healing. This is our situation, brothers and sisters, in our generation, especially the young generation. There is a lot of trials. There is a lot of alluring from the right path in this world. But ask help. Ask help. Brothers, there is no shame in asking that I struggle with this. I need help on this. This worldly sense that if you ask help, that you're, not a strong man, that's worldly. I wouldn't say that word. That's the devil's interjection in this worldly, idea. Ask help. Ask help. So his refusal to seek counsel or connection, either to God or through his brother, birthed violence and not healing. That's why we see a lot of violence right now. The violence does not come from outside. It's what is within in our heart. But this point, I love this point of explaining, and I think they're going to put it here, because this tells us of who truly God is and how God's judgment works. You know what it says? The punishment mirrors the condition of Cain's soul. And I'll give time for you guys to truly see this and understand this. The punishment mirrors the condition of Cain's soul. What did God say to him? You will be restless, wanderer, right? But that was the condition of his soul already. Restless, homelessness, unsettled. So God's punishment was not arbitrary. It wasn't. It is just the unfolding of what has already inside of him. See? This is very important. And Christ actually doubled down and said this in the gospel, right? What's from a man's heart is what comes out. So when God testifies of the result of his sin, is not a punishment. Yeah, we can call it as a punishment, but inside he's already unsettled. He's scattered. Cain. And Augustine writes that peace is the tranquility of order. Cain, having rejected order in his heart, become unable to dwell in ordered society. Because Cain rejected the order of his heart, it becomes so hard for him to live in an ordered society. He becomes restless. His external chaos, exile, fear of death, and even to the point, if you read in the Genesis chapter 4, you know what Cain said later on when God says, after he killed his brother, and God says, what have you done? The voice of your brother blood cries out to me, and from the ground. And then, so now you are cursed from the earth, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood. When you till the ground, it shall not no longer yield its strength to you. You will be groaning and trembling on the earth. And then Cain said this. Cain said to the Lord, my guilt is too great to be forgiven. But again, in the old versions of the Bible, in the Ge'ez part, or the Orthodox Study Bible, mostly on the Ge'ez part, you know what it says? Cain didn't decide saying like his fate. He didn't decide his fate. When God says all these things, Cain said this word. And it was so touching for me. And translated in Mark says, ታዲያ እንደዚህ ቢሆን ልጅን ታጠፋዋለህ? So even all of these things happen, would you struck your child? Would you sin? Is it like a child who's like really like has a sad face and very like bitter, right? And he say like, so this is going to happen to me? And then because of that, Cain actually added something that God never said. God never said that people is going to kill you from here on when you read in the scriptures. See? The distortedness of the heart, the unsettledness, unrest creates something, an illusion that never happened. God never said that, okay, you're going to be restless, but he didn't say when you read that people is going to kill you. But Cain said this the same thing. My guilt is too great from forgiven. Surely you have driven me out of this day from the face of the ground. I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be groaning and trembling on the earth. Then it will happen, if anyone finds me, people are going to kill me. They're going to kill me. Cain, because of his distorted heart and his unrest and unsettledness, had the illusion of things that are not going to happen. So many times that happens in our life, right? How many of us define our life saying, and actually someone texted me earlier in the morning today saying that, oh, I'm falling back into my old sin habits again. Now Christ is not going to be with me. Where did you get that? Where did you get that? See, this is an illusion. You created, because you've fallen into sin, you created an illusion that God is not going to be next to you. God is not going to forgive you. He's not going to see, he's not going to be pleased to see you. Where are you getting that? So Cain, even in a peaceful surrounding, Cain was troubled, inner chaos turned it, even paradise into torment. So the insight here is a soul out of communion with God will always be at war within itself. A soul that is not communing with God is always at a war within itself, with the people around, because of an illusion. I know I'm taking too much time, but this is very important because it's a part of your life. How you're going to live moving forward. So bear with me, okay? I know because of restlessness that we trained, a bit longer sermon is going to be too much for you too, right? So let's bear it. The other aspect of the person, the character, Daniel, still in the face of the midst of chaos. Still. Faced exiling, being chaos from the beginning, but he did not isolate himself. See, Cain, when all those things come, he isolated from his brother and from the relationship with God. He's in his own thoughts, creating an illusion and committing murder. But what did Daniel do? I love this part of Daniel's story. You know what happened? So, the king sees a dream. And then he completely forgot the dream. So he collected the wise people at that time. He said, oh, I saw a dream that I know it's very important, but I completely don't remember the dream and the interpretation of it. Tell me the dream and tell me the interpretation. They were like, this is insane. This is not fair. If you tell us the dream, we can tell you. You say, no, tell me the dream and tell me the interpretation. They could not be able to do that. So he said, why am I feeding you? Why am I giving you all these gifts? And then he murdered them. And there was a chaos. So when that happened, Daniel would hear this. And he asked, what happened? Oh, the king murdered all this because they are not able to remember the dream and interpret it. And Daniel said to the person, go tell the king. I'll tell him the dream, and then I'll tell him the explanation of it. Are you following me here? Are you following me? You know in the story what happens right after that? You know what happened? After Daniel said this to the person, Daniel didn't go to the king to tell him, okay, this is your dream. Daniel went back to his friends and he told them, okay, this kind of problem might come amongst us. So pray for me. Pray for this situation so that God would reveal a vision for me and the interpretation. This is the right way to go. This is what it's supposed to be done. When there is trials, when there is chaos, asking for help of righteous brothers. People are in the same faith. So he told them, Ananiah, Azariah, Mishael, he told them, pray for me. Because, so that God will reveal dreams, the dream and the meaning, so that I can explain to the king. Daniel chapter 2, verse 17 to 18. Then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men on Babylon. So, see, this is a Christian way. There's a trial, ask for help. Ask for help. Instead of internalizing it with fear and pride, sometimes it's pride, right? Like, well, I shouldn't tell them. Who are they to tell me things to do? Or maybe fear. If I tell them this, how does their perception be towards me? So instead of internalizing fear, and he remained connected. He doesn't matter. He doesn't focus on that. Both to God and to the godly companions, and as a result, peace ruled in his heart, even in Babylon. And then later on, when trial continues, it didn't stop. When trial continues, and he was thrown into the dens of the lion, what happened? Still. Be still. Asking for help. Seeking companionship from righteous brothers or from brothers in the same journey. But today, many of us suffer from chaos while appearing put together. And this is so sad. And of course, some of you would have experienced people that are closer to you or that you hear around that someone deeply, unfortunately, committing suicide. But that person When you see him outside, he's well put together. He's happy. She's happy. And the person that you know is OTYG is the most funniest, the most happy, creating a joke and everything. You don't see the inside chaos. And we'll put together, a student may be straight A's, and this is also some more people. People that are like perfectionists, straight A's, with acclamation of graduate and everything. Majority of them are people that have turmoil within them. You know where it comes from? To meet that expectation throughout their life. What would they say? After I have to keep their expectation from the parents, from the people around them. They toil so much, hurting themselves. But outside, they're the happiest, they're the most clever, smart people. Of course they're smart, but we don't see their inside turmoil and chaos. Straight A's and be well liked, yet silently battles guilt, anxiousness, and being burned out. They're outwardly, they're successful, but inwardly unraveling because of unresolved pain, expectation, unrealistic expectation, constant need of appraisal and approval by others, and lack of true spiritual connection. What are the examples would look like? One, withdrawal of a relationship. That's what can happen in our life, withdrawal of a relationship. The person begins to isolate, emotionally or physically. From friends, from family, from a church group, from spiritual mentors. Two, loss of perspective. When you're becoming alone, you're alone with your thoughts. There is no one to reason with you, to say these thoughts might not be the right thought. It's just only within your mind. The person loses objective truth. They rely negative experiences in their minds constantly. Again, they replay it again and again. And then their emotions become louder than the reason of faith. And they would start saying, nobody understands me. Nobody understands me. I have to handle it by myself. It's so unfortunate to hear this. No one understands me. I have to deal it by myself. And then after that, vulnerability to the passions. So they start listening to the passions. With no one to check and challenge their hearts, passions will take root, which means anger towards people. Fear festers with paranoia, right? And then in order to accommodate or to equip with them, lust would come. And you would fall into some multiple forms of escape, lustful escape, for such heavy heart passions. And then you say, also pride, you say I don't need any more. And that finally will continue to breaking down inner order. The inner order starts breaking, the soul becomes scattered, your mind should be distracted always, the mind spins in circle. Every simple decision becomes so overwhelming. Every simple decision. And joy becomes inaccessible, right? To be happy. Then the heart is now no longer grounded. Now you're in chaos. Your heart is in chaos. And then what that leads is the chaos emerges to start the subtle isolation, become a loud internal wall. In the same way Cain killing his brother comes, right? But the person may appear fine outwardly. So, final result, the person ends up emotionally exhausted, spiritually dry, relationally detached. Disconnection is not always physical, it's spiritual and emotional as well. The devil's most powerful weapon is to make you feel that you're lonely. You're the only one struggling with these things. You're the only one experiencing this. You're lonely. People cannot understand you. There's no one shares of what you're sharing, what you experience. That's what it tells you. And final point, chaos, because of that, is the offspring of fear. Fear is the soil that grows chaotic world. fear of failure, fear of rejection, not being in control. So fear arises from imagined futures without God within them. I love this verse, the point, if you have it there. Fear arises from an imagined future where God is not within it. And such fear makes us to either numb ourselves with, earlier as we said, so many things. It could be alcohol, it could be porn, it could be other things, right? Numb ourselves because we cannot constantly sit with our thoughts, restlessness with our thoughts, and with our illusions. That can be, remedied, but because of our illusions, God is not with me, God is resenting me, and all of those things, right? Creating chaos. Fear distorts perception. Fear distorts perception. We begin to interpret situations, people. So and so, people there, they don't like me, right? Fear fuels control. And control fuels anxiety, and anxiety fuels chaos. And this is a cycle. And the two examples, and this is the last part, is Cain. Cain, we'll come to Cain again. A fear that creates illusion and clouded the future. Earlier I mentioned this one. The future, because of his illusion, is people are going to kill me. I can't live. They're going to drive me around the world. I become a slave for anyone. That's what's going to happen. My punishment is greater than I can bear, right? So he has a fear of rejection, a fear of comparison because of his brother, fear of exposure, right? Many of us has that, fear of rejection. So much so that it is okay for us sometimes, sadly, to be rejected by God than to be rejected by people. In a comparison, we talked about that. So fear is what made him also Cain violent. So chaos, in the sense of the ground of fear, is overstimulation and no silence. So we've lost the discipline of silence, which makes chaotic heart. We fill every quiet second with noise. We fill it with noise. Even in driving to work, right? How many of us just a few of us, but not a lot of us want just to drive quietly. We have to hear a podcast. We open a podcast, we open a mezmur, we open things, we scroll, and every stillness and being quiet. We fear being quiet. And this example that I prepared, and I promise, is before the instance that happened yesterday. But one of the things is a person feels anxious the moment their phone dies, and that was me. And they're left alone with their thoughts. But I would imagine that's not only me, right? Imagine you, right now at this moment, for the next an hour, or let's say right now it's because you're in certain part, right? Let's say everything is done, and your phone is out for an hour or two. How that would make you feel? That's a very important thing to think about. It's fear. Fear of missing out, right? The FOMO things that we say. Fear of missing out. Fear of what if someone calling, not reaching out to me. And finally, the fear of global unrest, right? 24/7, some of us are in the news. The world is happening this. We're failing, losing a job, especially in our time right now, right? So all these threats of peace, these are the threats of peace, and peace becomes circumstantial. But the source of Daniel's inner peace is not the circumstance. It's a consistent prayer. In the first part, when we cover, or the first part of the story, is that comparison, not to compare ourselves, right? The second part is to ask help, companions. And the third part is consistent prayer. And in the Daniel chapter 6, verse 10, it says this. As was his custom since early days, Daniel, we used to go in a certain time and do a prayer. From the different kinds of prayer, for us, the most hardest prayer is consistent and structured prayer. It's easier for us to go in the car, be in the shower, go on the bed, sleeping, to talk to God. That's the easier part. But consistent prayer and a designated time, a designated place, a designated recital of prayer is uphill for all of us. So hard. But Daniel used to do this. Daniel had cultivated a disciplined inner life that does not fluctuate based on danger. That is not fluctuate based on danger. So many of us start after the confession, after getting a penance. For the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I was so on strike, praying, doing all these things. Then what happened? I always would ask, then what happened? And some people, not even to the point of failing, that's understandable, but they don't focus to find the reason. And mostly, the reason is outside circumstances. Oh, I've become busy now, like it's because of the work situation that I have, because people came to my family, or because there was a vacation, or because we break the fast, there was no fast, all the situations around you. But Daniel wasn't trying to control the chaos. He trusted in God's sovereignty, and he was disciplined no matter what. He rested in God's authority. He knew that his life is in God's hands. This is very important. Stillness comes not because of your situation, but understanding where your soul rests or who controls of your life. And Daniel knew this. He did not change his rhythm because the world changed around him. He did not change his rhythm or his discipline because the world around him was changed. He was consistent. No matter what. His prayers are answered, it doesn't matter. I'm consistent. And his 3 friends are a testament to this. You remember, until we celebrated humbly the celebration of the saving of the 3 children? One of the words that they said to the king is, we're not going to bow down to your statue. And we made, and from the boiled water that he prepared for our persecution, God is going to save us. For sure he's going to save us. But if he's not going to save us, we still are not going to worship your statue. Would we say this? Lord, I trust you. And I show my trust through prayer because I know that you're going to save me from this financial stress or loss of job or not having a relationship or anything. I know you're going to bring good from it. Like you're going to make it happen. But if you're not going to make it happen, I'll continue. I'll still continue. Will we say that? Or our trusting in God is circumstantial? Having said that, chaos in its essence is a spiritual sickness. Chaos is not something that you look outward, brothers and sisters. Chaos, if there is within each individual of our hearts that we need to work on. A condition of our soul, alienated, separated from God. Misaligned with divine order. That is chaos. That is truly chaos. But the story does not end here. Christ did not merely offer teachings to correct us. Or he said, this is chaos, deal with it. He offered something. God offered something. Rather, God offered someone to correct that chaosness in our heart. The next portion, after the break, after the discussion, the next event or program, is how are we going to deal with chaos? This chaos in our heart. Through him comes a peace that the world cannot give. What is this peace? Or how do we understand the idea of peace? Or is it just an idea? Or what is it? Because we know that the peace that we know is the peace treaties, the teachings, the historic, whatever, all those, the Nobel Peace Prize, that's not the peace that Christ gives. But what is the peace that Christ gives? That we're going to see it later, and we'll focus on truly living in that peace, living with that peace, and reflecting that peace towards others. May God help us to understand that. Glory be to God.